All right, we need to talk about this Cooper Rush thing because we need to start asking ourselves, is this for real? Is this somewhere in between? Or is this kind of a smokescreen? And what this legitimately does mean for Dak in the future. Now, I'm not somebody who's going to come on here and tell you that like Cooper's going to take Dak's job. And the reason is not performance based, right? Like so many times in sports, we want the solution and the answer to every problem to be like a meritocracy, right? Merit based or performance based. And in an ideal world, maybe that's what happens, or at least in an amateur world, which most of us are familiar with sports from an amateur perspective because we don't make it professional. That is the case, right? Any given Sunday, next man up. And no lie, for like a portion of the roster, that is legitimately the case, right? Like if you're a high paid linebacker, you get outperformed, your contract is not guaranteed or sticky enough to the franchise to where that's going to preclude them from making a decision that makes the team better with the cheaper player or makes the team just as good with the cheaper player. That kind of thing happens all the time. But the quarterback position is a little bit different, and there are some positions and players that are different because of guaranteed money. And that's the exact situation with Dak Prescott. Why Dak Prescott is absolutely going to take the starting job back when he gets back, and why he will be the starter for years on for the Dallas Cowboys. Because the thing is with his contract isn't that, oh, he's paid or owed what, $50 million next year, $50 million after that, and it's an expensive contract. That's not necessarily the reason, right? One, him and Cooper Rush are about the same age. They're both about 29, about to be 30. I think Cooper is what? Cooper might be a year younger. No, Cooper the exact same age. So they both 29 this year, right? So that's one thing, right? If Cooper Rush were younger and on a rookie deal, you might be able to keep him and then have Dak's contract go to the end, and then you can play that leverage off of each other where it's like, hey, we might just keep Cooper, right? It's a similar thing to what the Ravens are attempting to do with Lamar Jackson, where they're just saying, hey, man, we'll just keep Tyler Huntley on the roster, and if you leave, we'll pay Tyler to be the starter. Right. That's kind of the leverage that Baltimore has. And that might have been the leverage that the Cowboys have. But the problem with that situation is that both Lamar and Tyler are both under 28. Right. So you're not worried about them aging or anything. And I know when we talk about pocket passers, we don't tend to talk about aging, but aging happens with pocket passers. Just look at Matt Ryan. But nonetheless, the reason why Dak's not going anywhere is you can't even trade Dak right now, right? Like Dak's contract is so sticky that you can't trade him. What do I mean by that, right? One, his guarantees have only hit so far. And what that means is that he has a ton of dead money. And dead money is the money that has to be paid by the team, whether this dude is on the team or not, right? So if you trade Dak, if you cut Dak, which is not happening, you have to pay the dead cap amount that's on that contract, or you have to negotiate it with another team to split that money up. The problem with Dak is his dead cap number is $108 million this year. $89 million next year, and you don't get an out until 2024, where his dead cap number is still 39, but at least you would get some cap relief because his cap hit that year is going to be 52. So to put this in perspective, this year he's owed $20 million against the cap. He has a $108 million dead cap number. What that means is that if you cut Dak Prescott or trade him, you're going to lose $80 million in cap space, right? If you do it next year, it's 49 to 89. You're going to lose $30 million in cap space. So you're talking giant amounts of money, like 2-star players worth of money this year if you got rid of them or traded Dak Prescott. And if a team wanted to trade for Dak Prescott, they would probably have to bring in, on top of the 20 mil that they're taking in to have Dak be on their team, the regular cap hit, they would also have to eat like $50 million. You're talking about paying $70 million for a couple years for a year of quarterback play. And Dak Prescott is a good quarterback. He is not that good to justify that. I mean, like even Patrick Mahomes, you would have to like think about that for a second. So the economics of this situation make it so that Dak's going to get his job back. He is extremely secure in this. If this happened in 2024, we'd have a real conversation about who's going to be the starter for the rest of the year. But this happening at the beginning of his contract, Dak Prescott is going to have that job. And even if he's not good at that job, he's going to have that job because he has negotiated a contract that has given him insane security for the next couple of years, this season and next year at least. So while Cooper might have a better win-loss record or win percentage than Dak when he comes back, and I don't like this assumption that Dak's going to be like bad and the team's going to stink once they get him back. If they're able to win with Cooper Rush, they're probably able to win with Dak. And let's talk about Cooper and what he's done. And I think what Cooper Rush has done is pretty decent work, right? Like, I think he's been good enough for you not to lose. Defensively, they've been able to step up. He's been able to make some big drives when he's needed to. He hasn't been a spectacular player, but he's been a very serviceable player. And that's not super common at the quarterback position. And I think what Cooper Rush's success really says to the NFL, or at least what I think it should say to the NFL, is we should really invest in more developmental options for these boundary roster guys that sometimes hardly get a shot, right? Because I don't think Cooper Rushes are rare, but I do think Cooper Rush being with this team, you know, he was partly on the Giants in 2020, but he's been with the Cowboys since he was undrafted in 2017, which means he's been able to develop without being asked to play much for a very long time on some practice squads and everything else. So once he got the opportunity to start, he looked competent. And I don't think competence should be as hard to find at the quarterback position as it is right now. And I think one of the reasons why competence league-wise is so difficult to find is because we don't let these borderline cases, right, where a guy like Cooper Rush gets in and he might have some of the raw skills necessary, but not some of the mental processing. And if he's not good enough by the time he's 22 or 25, he's probably gone and out the league, right? We've seen this with a lot of very talented quarterbacks. There needs to be a fallback option. There needs to be an option for guys who are on that level where they can't justify a roster spot, especially at quarterback where you usually only carry two guys on the roster. But they have some promise, right? And I think if we did that as a league, if the NFL did that, you would see more Cooper Rushes out there, more Jacoby Brissett's out there, more guys who, look, man, they're not going to lead you to anything spectacular, but their presence, right? If the worst quarterback in the NFL was somebody of Cooper Rush or Jacoby Brissett's level, then overall the product would be so much more watchable because at the end of the day, those are serviceable quarterbacks. Cooper Rush is a serviceable quarterback. If you have good enough things around him, you can win some games. And I think that's what he's proven because he's smart enough not to mess it up. So this Cooper Rush thing, it's exciting. I think it's fun. And I'm happy for Cooper Rush. I'm happy for anybody who's going to be able to secure a significant amount of money from the NFL owners at the end of the year, right? And that's what Cooper's in position to do, which is, you know, at the end of this year, when he's a free agent, which he is scheduled to be, somebody's going to want to pay him, right? Somebody's going to see 5-0. They're going to see that Cowboys helmet. You know how people get when they see that Cowboys helmet. It's like the Yankees, right? Just because you played there, it raises your value for whatever reason. And people are going to see that. And he's going to get paid a significant amount of money. But what I do think Cooper Rush's success does expose is how underprepared we have a lot of these quarterbacks go out there to be, and how much just having somebody who's been prepared for a few years to be competent can just stand out, because we're really failing young edge case developmental quarterbacks when we don't have a developmental system. And again, Dak's not going anywhere. I know it's a fun thing to talk about, but Dak's going to keep his job because they can't afford for Dak not to be the starting quarterback with that contract. And that doesn't mean Dak's a bad person for having a good contract. That means Dak did what he's supposed to do, right? You want to negotiate a contract that's going to keep you secure. That's a whole point of a contract, right? If the contract didn't keep your job secure, you would probably never sign the contract, because that's the entire point of it from a worker standpoint. So I think this is an interesting situation down there in Dallas. Now, one thing I do think this is going to have an effect on Dak with is it's not going to shorten his leash with ownership, even though Jerry Jones is a bit unpredictable. I think this shortens his leash with the fans, though, right? And Cowboy fans have been in and out with Dak the last few years. There's been Dak wars going on in Cowboy Nation, right? Some people are hardcore Dak defenders, and then some people are hardcore Dak haters. I've seen this dynamic play out on Twitter, at least. But this just gave all the Dak haters all the fuel in the world, and not just fuel, but credible fuel, right? Before, when you were talking about Dak needed to be benched, people would just be like, all right, man, you just tripping. But now when you could bring up Cooper Rush had this record and what's Dak's win percentage and all of this, like, you have stats that, while they might be unfair in how you're bringing them up, are ultimately justifiable and reasonable, and everybody's seen them. And this is going to make Dak's life a little bit more difficult, because now it's going to take a lot less for a lot more people to be fed up with his faults as a quarterback. And Dak, he hasn't had the playoff success that you want. He hasn't taking the Cowboys to the places I think Cowboy fans feel like they should be. And when you're a quarterback in that situation, you're already fighting an uphill battle because you have an engaged fan base that is also unhappy with where they're at. And that's a recipe for a bad relationship, right? There's tons of people who've been in that situation and things did not end well, right? You could be a good quarterback in a horrible situation that has no chance to win, but you can't be a good okay enough quarterback that hasn't gotten over the hump in a very good situation like Dallas, because people are going to start looking at you like you the problem, and also you don't want to make all the money. So that is my thoughts on this whole Cooper Rush thing. Let me know what y'all think about this whole Cooper Rush thing. Do you think Cooper Rush becomes a starter somewhere else? Do you think there's a chance that Jerry Jones does something crazy that makes him the starter in Dallas? Let me know what you guys think of this. And also let me know what you guys think about solutions for the NFL to create a developmental league so quarterback play and a bunch of other positions can get better as the years go on. But that's it. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.